All right, guys. Today we've got Shannon here. Shannon is the Director of Communications at Podbean, which is a podcast publishing and monetization service. But on top of that, they have a bunch of other really cool features that I strongly recommend checking out. We've brought her in here today to talk about building engagement, creating a community, and how you can monetize your podcast. Shannon, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, great to be here.
So what would you recommend people kind of look into first when building engagement and creating their community around their podcast? Is it two separate things or do it kind of work hand in hand?
I think they kind of work hand in hand. I think when we think about engagement, a lot of times we are thinking the way it's used in marketing, where it just means kind of how many people are clicking and liking and subscribing and that, where community I think is broader and more difficult and more elusive, but also has a lot more rewards to it. And I think the most important thing with community is to first start with your why, which kind of everything in podcasting, anything we could talk about, that'll be the start of it. Mm-hmm. But why are you doing your podcast? And that will lead to why anyone would want to be part of your community. Yeah. You know, what is the value they're getting out of it, and why, and also why would you want to build a community? Are there reasons? I mean, there may be cases where someone doesn't want to, and it's certainly something that takes quite a bit of work and nurturing. So thinking about that, I definitely would be a strong advocate for saying building a strong community and building that engagement with the audience is going to almost always have rewards. I think it's, I would vote on the side of doing it, but I think, thinking about why and kind of, what your plan is with it is the place to start.
Yeah, I think the why is a big part too. Obviously, I don't know if you're familiar with, is it Simon Sinek who wrote the book Start With Why? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like a really powerful book. And I remember reading it and it just made so much sense, like focusing on that why and then kind of building on it from there can give it much more kind of oomph or power. And it kind of helps you discover what you want to talk about as well and what you want to do around it instead of kind of like trying to feel your way through the dark. Yes. So like once they're building some engagement, what are kind of some of the different places that they can build their engagement up?
Yeah, I think that some of the social media platforms that you're going to be on, I mean, number one with everything with social media, number one is thinking about, again, kind of back to your why, but where is the type of audience you want to connect with. So just for general promotion, that's of course a good piece of advice. But then for really engaging with community, some social media is kind of better than others. I mean, you can, like with Twitter, of course, you can message back and forth, but it's going to be more of a conversation. So that's engagement, but it's not necessarily community. Forum type of things and groups are more community oriented in my mind. So the one I see most podcasts doing and using is Facebook groups. Yep. And actually I know a lot of people who don't really do much with Facebook anymore, but the reason they still go to Facebook is because of groups. Yeah. I think it's one of the best features there. So a lot of people have private podcasting groups for their podcast. And I did a presentation on this workshop not too long ago. And one of the examples I used, it's a podcast called The Gravity Beard. It's hosted with us, and they actually were nice enough to record a podcast episode for us, which I used a lot of snippets from. But they have this community, and the numbers that they have when they look at their analytics on Facebook are just incredible. Basically, people, including myself, I'm in the community, we go to Facebook, and that's the reason we want to be there. We want to see what's going on in that group, and they've made it really fun. But, it depends a lot on kind of your audience. So it may be, if it's gamers, it may be doing a Discord. It's what are they used to? I think live streaming in a Discord sense where you have that community, or in using just any of the live streaming platforms, or we have Podbean Live, is a great way, because a typical podcast, when you're putting it out there, you probably have a community that you don't even know about, because it's more of, your voice going out to the world. And so I think those live streaming platforms, things like Facebook groups or other forums, potentially creating your own, it can be good. But a lot of us nowadays, we want to kind of be where we already are on the internet. So it might, another forum or something may not have the ease of access. So those are some of the kind of the basic places and things. And then it's more how you nurture it. What do you do? What makes it exciting for people to be there? What are the, like if it was a gaming podcast, for example, what are the things everybody wants to talk about? What are people really into? How is it maybe different from what's out there? And then the example I mentioned, the Gravity Beard, they're really this sort of all-purpose kind of comedy podcast. And their group has ended up being, it's actually called The Interns, and everybody has roles, and it's all this fun stuff. So their purpose really became to the same as their podcast, to be this fun, lighter place where people can kind of get away from, any kind of in-depth discussions or, life in general, just kind of escape a bit, and it be a happy kind of fun place on the internet. And so their community and their podcast, it really goes hand in hand in that case. So it's, thinking about different ways to engage that audience then.
Yeah. So I guess, because there's two sides of the coin too. Obviously you have people that are doing podcasts and they're focusing more on the podcasting, and then they kind of have their community. And then there's also the people that are doing it for like branding or business purposes. So they kind of go each direction. I guess like building engagement is, when you're doing it for businesses and stuff like that, it's a little bit easier because you might have a website, blog posts, and you might have lead magnets and those kind of things. Do you see, so you might have like the people who are more inclined to just like focus on the podcast and are looking to monetize the podcast itself. Do you see like kind of tactics that they can use for engagement that isn't in line with like the business side of things, or?
Yeah, I think like the example I brought up is one like that. I mean, it's not at all related to a business or anything. And there's a couple of other groups I'm in that are very, another one is another comedy podcast I'm thinking of.
Yep.
One other one that I thought of from a while back was a true crime podcast. And so those are generally the things that are more like Facebook groups, communities, and then you just kind of have to think about what direction you want it to take. All of those need to have a bit of moderation to keep them sort of in line with, so people don't get annoyed with their spam on it, or and also to just start the conversation flowing. Because at first it doesn't, depending on your audience, but typically people are a little shy at first with those communities. So you have to be the one posting things and prompting questions and stuff like that. So I think that's more the style for that kind of podcaster. And then they might wonder, well, what's the benefit? Like with a business podcast and a community for bringing in customers, it's quite obvious what your end goal would be and what your benefit would be. For these other podcasts, what I've seen is that number one, it grows, those people are your fans and your champions. So it's a way to grow your podcast because they're the ones that I'm going to remember the ones where I'm in their group much more than the other, hundreds of podcasts in my list. And I'm going to recommend it to people, and I'm going to say, join the group, and I'm going to be your champion more so. But also when it comes to monetizing, if they want to get advertisers, if they want to, we'll talk about all these, so I won't get into all the ways, but almost all of the ways that you could monetize, it will help to have a more engaged community. The advertisers, they look a lot of times at numbers of downloads, but if you can show, look at this engagement we have on our Facebook group. Okay, we're a smaller podcast, but these people are going to buy what we recommend because we have a relationship. So they get much higher sales percentages. So they'll even look at a smaller podcast. And obviously when it comes to listener support, financial support and stuff, those community members are more likely to do those kind of things. So it can have a monetary payoff. It definitely can help expand the podcast. And again, back to also for the people that it's a much more casual thing that they're doing their podcast for. It may be because they socially and personally benefit. So they really want to have a community of other people like them to kind of hang out with online. And so they may be doing it purely for those reasons. So that's another potential benefit.
Yeah, I think like you made a really good point there with like when people looking to monetize and stuff like that. So let's move to that kind of area next. So there's obviously so many different options there are. There's obviously the main ones, which is getting donations, or like your Patreon, which is obviously quite large, and then like monetizing with ads. So let's look at them ones first, and then maybe look at some of the more alternative ones that follow there. But so what do you see is like working quite well in the advertising space and the kind of like the Patreon donation space? You mentioned like creating more engagement, which I think is really on point, because you could have 10,000 listeners, but if you've got 1,000 champions, like you said, they're going to be far more inclined to be active, and you're probably better off really focusing around building that first than you are around trying to just hit numbers, which some people get caught up in.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. For advertising, there's a lot of different ways to approach getting advertisers. If you're going to do it on your own, or maybe with the help of like an agent or something like that, so you're going to get, host read ads. You're going to be presenting directly to an advertiser. Here's my actually, we have a sample media kit on Podbean. I'll give a little plug for that. It's free, but we made that because I think that's something you should do right away if you're looking to attract advertisers that way. And in that, that's where you can put, okay, yeah, X number of downloads, but you can put more than just that. So that's where you put, here's our social media numbers, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I think that's very useful. And I think I've seen that work well for smaller podcasts, especially when they seek, or maybe they get help with finding an advertiser that's a more targeted fit to their audience, depending on what the podcast is.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. There's all kinds of services. So I would say the technology and the services out there, in the 5 years I've been in podcasting, it's evolved massively. I remember at the beginning it was kind of like, oh, there's one or two big companies, there's mid-roll, and there were a couple others, that match you with advertisers if you have, at least 10,000 downloads, but preferably more. And it was kind of like, that's what there is. And then you can strike out on your own and try to find advertisers, which some people are really savvy with, and other people were like, forget it. It'll never happen. I don't know where to begin. So it'll never happen. And that was kind of all there was. But now there's a lot of, we have an advertising marketplace, and that is for podcasts of any size, of our podcast hosted with us of any size, because it's the advertiser can buy across a range of podcasts. So if they want 10,000 downloads, they don't need to get it all from one podcast.
Yeah.
So that kind of service is available. I believe there's one called Dynamo that Spreaker has also. There's an Anchor. It has something internally if you're hosted with them that's somewhat similar.
Yep.
So there's a lot of those coming about. So I guess the other piece nowadays is when you are a bit smaller, you can look at those kind of options. But it's also, some people do want to jump right into that. And honestly, like the amount, if you're really small, the amount of money you're going to make is it might be better to analyze that and wait, because it's a small amount of money. Potentially the CPM rate will be small, and then maybe you're, potentially alienating your community or messing up your creativity with your podcast, if that's your main focus. So just to think about that, but there are more opportunities for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing with that is that the technology just for managing your ads has come so far. So the other thing we have, which is separate from our marketplace, is we have we call it a SaaS, a software as service, for managing podcast ads. So people just bring their own ads. They can get it however they want, through an agency, through themselves, whatever. It's just the system to manage the ads. So it on their behalf, it dynamically inserts the ad. So typically they do a host read ad, or maybe the company provides a pre-made one. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But they do that. They set the slots, so they look at their content. It's really good if you can plan it out ahead of time and plan where you'll have your spots. And then it dynamically inserts it on the fly. So it's just, I've seen it come so far, because this is something, it's all the big podcasts use that already. So they've been using that kind of technology forever, but smaller podcasts haven't had access to that. And so people sometimes think dynamically inserted, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't necessarily mean host read. It's just the technology. So you're hearing them all the time and you don't even know it because it's done well. So that's so much. So, and it saves time, of course, but also you can generate so much more revenue, because now, like with ours and most of them, you can geo-target. So you're getting an ad. Yeah, so you're getting an ad for Australia instead of hearing about a meal delivery service that's only in the US, which as a listener, it's much better for you. So it can be better for your listeners, but then also, I could say, okay, I have a huge population of listeners in Australia, and a huge population in the UK, and a huge population in the US. I can go after 3 different advertisers, and there's a potential to make a lot more money, make my listeners happier. And also I can run time-limited campaigns. So in the past, the ads, people would put them in, they just run forever. That's not how advertising usually works in other media. So the advertisers have been getting a really great deal, but with the dynamic, you can do it more like, other media does. And yeah, it can, there's some people that have really, really high downloads on their back catalog. So it's much more efficient doing it that way.
Yeah, so it brings the power back to the people in essence. Like, it brings it back to the podcast host, and it gives them a little bit more control. I think the geo-targeting stuff is really, really interesting as well. So I guess that's the kind of the ad space. And then the next kind of most popular spot is like your Patreon. And there's a few other platforms that are like that, but I've kind of had more of a look at Patreon because it's the most popular. I think you guys integrate with Patreon as well. Is that right?
We actually have a built-in service. It's called Podbean Patron.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's not Patreon. Yeah, it's our own service.
Oh, okay, so it's your own service. Is it pretty much like a similar kind of setup, is it?
It's similar. There's a few differences because we created ours specifically just for podcasters as opposed to other content creators. So the listener donations are all monthly. I think Patreon has the choice of monthly or by episode.
Yeah.
They have some different ways you can set it up.
Yeah.
So ours are all monthly, and it's tied right into our platform. But the concept is similar. Listeners, recurring donations. It's, sort of for content.
So on that kind of level, what have you seen work for you guys, and obviously the similar platforms like Patreon and stuff like that? What have you seen work quite well, hasn't worked, or what would you recommend people kind of look at doing in that kind of space moving forward?
Yeah, I think that really ties back into community. So building a strong community first, for sure. There's numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but Patreon always publishes numbers about kind of your percentage. If you have X number of subscribers, they have a good breakdown for YouTubers. And it's a very small percentage that will actually end up donating. But that percentage is an average, and it's really all across the board. So you can have a much smaller number and still be potentially earning. And there's a lot of examples out there. But of course, having either a big funnel, big top of the funnel where you have a lot of people, or having more people that are more engaged and will go down through the funnel and donate. Either of those are good approaches to make sure. I mean, you can set it up from the beginning, but it probably shouldn't be your main focus at first, good content. And I think the people we see that are really successful with it are people that have that. They have a strong community and or pretty, just they have something that people are really hungry for content-wise. And a lot of times it's really unique. One of our biggest earners the last year, we have a couple people earning around $100,000 a year from it. And one of our big earners, it's a podcast called Rex Factor. It's about Scottish kings.
Okay.
So very niche. Yeah, very niche. I think they've expanded out a bit since, but huge fans. And people love it. And so they do, part of one of the rewards that they do is a bonus content. And people are so hungry for what they're providing, and they're the only ones out there doing anything like it. So I always tell people, what I love is looking at the comments that listeners leave when they become donors, and it's nonstop. I felt guilty before not being able, until you set this up, not being able to support your work. I'm so excited to be part of it. I feel, and they do a thing where they give a name. I think you're a member of the Privy Council. This is what they do. Yep. And so I think that's a great tip is, having these, and it's a great thing just generally for community, don't just name your Facebook group, the blah, blah, blah podcast group, make some kind of thing that people like the group I was talking out there, the interns, people feel like it's something special. So I think doing those where your levels have certain names, where you feel like you're part of the inside track, I think that really helps. And then usually what people want is either they just want to support you. So, having some lower tiers where they can just give you a small amount that's not really a big deal to give $1 or $2. And that can add up, and then thinking about what kind of things they would want that might encourage them to donate more. And you can go, you can get very creative with it. Bonus content is the one that everybody does and everybody thinks about. And I think that definitely works well. But I also think podcasters, before they embark on that journey, should really think about the fact that there's a balance there of, how much money you're going to be bringing in versus the amount of work that it takes. And there are podcasts that don't do any bonus content and have Patreon supporters. So if it's going to stretch you too thin and make the content less quality, or have other things happen, you can't be consistent, that kind of thing, then, maybe that's not the best way to go with it. But merchandise and just getting people involved, having a special name, having them, another thing I think that podcast does is they have, if you're at a certain level, you can suggest a topic or somehow, be involved with the creation. So those are the things I've seen, people really care about.
I think that's really cool. Like being a part of kind of the story, I guess, as well. Like you said, building the community, and then they kind of get a name if they're a part of it and that kind of stuff. Like, it really opens up a lot to, because people want to be a part of something inherently as humans. We want to be part of groups. We're like group animals, if you want to put it that way. We kind of love getting in our little kind of groups and talking about the stuff that we enjoy talking about. But being able to kind of create something along those lines where you're engaged on the next level, like being in part of it, makes a huge difference. And obviously it shows with how well those guys are doing with the podcasters, niches, Scottish Kings.
Yeah. And I tell people, I refer them a lot of times to look at the comments. And I think you can do something, I think you can probably see something like that in Patreon too.
Yeah.
But if you click on one of our patron, that's, we have some examples up there, some of our top ones. And I say, click on their comments if you're feeling, because of the reaction I used to get. Now people are pretty used to Patreon. It's pretty well known. But I used to get this reaction, how could I ask people for money? I can't do that. And I would say, just wait. If you're really producing stuff people love, or you have an engaged group, they're going to start asking you. And there's another podcaster who solely supports herself. And I think she even has staff now. And she was an example of that. She was doing something she loved, and people kept asking her, and she said she set up every single possible way they can donate. I mean, she's like, if people want to give money, I'm not going to put a barrier. I'm not going to say, well, I refuse to sign up for Venmo. So she has PayPal and Venmo and Patreon. And she said people even mail her checks. So she's like, fine, here's a P.O. box, So making it easy, making it accessible, but it goes back a little bit to thinking about strategy and where you want to spend time and energy, because that can be a lot to manage, especially if you're providing a lot of rewards. If it's pretty straightforward and you're not having to manage a ton of rewards back to people and stuff, then it might not be as much. But if everyone's gonna get weekly bonus content, then you have to, you're gonna have to probably hit a certain level of income to make that worth it.
Yeah. So maybe building it out as you progress to kind of the amount of people you have on your team and moving forward might be the best option for them. So what other, I've seen a few other kind of tactics. One is obviously transcribing your content and using your original content and then just delivering it in another method. And membership sites are another one. Are there a few others that you've seen that have worked along those lines, or do you have any experience in those two areas?
Yeah, we also have a premium platform, I guess you could call it. So basically where people can either just sell single episodes, like bonus content, we call it bonus episodes, or they can sell memberships. And of course you could also do a membership through your own membership site or whatever. They're similar. It's just what platform you use. In our case, we handle all the payment, and then we handle the content delivery. So it's smooth. It's really easy if they're already hosting with Podbean, because they publish an episode just like any other episode. They just click a different button to say this is one that's for sale. So that makes it easy, but you can set it up however you want. And that also we have, we saw in both of those, we saw around 60% income growth last year. So we see people doing better and better with that. Mm-hmm. And that again, it's sort of similar in that, except for it's more directly related to content. In that case, you have to have an engaged community, but it's really about having good content, because even if people love you, if you don't have anything good to give them to sell, then it's not, it's not going to be. So I think that works well for either people that, one of the podcasts we have that has done really well with that was, it's some kind of gaming podcast, but they do more real in-depth kind of reviews and maybe really hot topic kind of stuff. So that's a bit unique because that's not usually the kind of content I see, but that's worked really well for them. And whatever particular game or niche they're in, there was just barely anything out there, I guess, of the quality level that they had, and they hit it, I think, at the right time also. They were kind of ahead of anybody else doing that. But then the other area I see it a lot is people that have either sort of course type of things to offer, training, things that, help you build your business or that kind of stuff. So it's the kind of stuff that you would put out there, normally as a paid course or something. You can do it as a podcasting, premium podcast content or video or PDFs or kind of the whole variety. So that tends to work really well.
Yeah, cool. Is there any myths that you that come through in like the podcasting and monetization space that you hear a lot, or like common things that people bring up that just aren't true?
Yeah, there's so many. The one I mentioned about dynamic ad insertion is a big one. Still, people are like, oh no, I'm not going to do my podcast. Yeah. And then I say, well, did you listen to, I don't know, I bring up a big name podcast. I'm like, they use it, and they're like, oh, but their ad is so nice. And it's like, well, it's just because you have to do it well. So that's one big one. I think, still that you have to have an exact like 50,000 downloads to ever get an ad, isn't true. But I also think it's not really a myth, but I guess right now I see a lot of people coming into podcasting and like day one, they're like, okay, how do I make money?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, you might be able to, but let's look at, what's your podcast? Let's look at it and see, how's your cover art? What's your site? Did you have a following beforehand? What's the time? And then they'll say, well, it's just me and my buddy talking and they're horrible. And, it's like, well, you have a little homework to do first.
Yeah, it's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the jumping kind of right into it without some strategy and kind of back work is, it's common in any kind of content creation space, I guess.
Oh, definitely.
And then the other thing, I can talk about live streaming in a minute because that has a monetization aspect to it. But the other thing that it kind of falls in with myths, I guess, in a way, is that I think, and you kind of mentioned this, I think a lot of people are really making money in a more indirect way from their podcast.
Yeah.
And that's probably most overlooked. And yet probably where people are making the most money. Yeah. So people that are, using their podcast as a marketing tool, to continue to build their brand, it can be anything from building their business and bringing in customers and leads and kind of the more typical thing you might think about, but even getting opportunities. There was somebody recently I know, he has a fishing show, Fish Nerds, Clay, he's a great guy, and he got a broadcasting job in his local area because of his podcast. So job opportunities and, getting speaking gigs and all these kind of things that, it can be a powerful thing for. And nowadays it's getting to the point where, if you're that person that's looking to do that, you really kind of almost have to have a podcast. It's everybody has one. It's a cool thing.
It's cool. I think how well the platform's developed over the past couple of years is unreal. Like I really like the area it's going in. That's why I've started getting involved with like the guys at Podkite. We're all working on it now. We're doing the data and analytics, and it's really fun and it's a really cool space. And I think the other side of it too is I come from a marketing background and like doing Facebook advertising and stuff like that. But then I started moving more towards marketing and content and the stories that come with content and being able to create stories, and then just the capacity even with YouTube to be able to, if you have a phone and one of your buddies and you're just filming something in relation to something that you like, you have the potential to create a short series on something that you find is interesting. And to come that far from even 10, 15 years ago where online media or media in general was so hard to develop to kind of becoming easier and easier, more accessible. It gives everyone the opportunity to kind of do something that they want to do. And there's so much more opportunity now. And I guess another thing too, people get crippled by opportunity. They kind of like, what can I do here? What can I do there? So they need to kind of focus on, I guess, what we were talking about earlier, their why, and focus on what they really like doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And now with podcasting, it's the same way. We probably, I don't remember the date, but it was 4 years ago or something. In our app, we made it where it's a podcast recorder. We were, I think, probably the first one out there that was a podcasting platform that also had that built in.
Yep.
We didn't get nearly as much buzz as some others that came after us. We were always like a little early to the game, I guess. But now we have a lot more people that use that, and because you can do some basic editing in it, and as you said, people are doing. I mean, it's becoming more of a thing to do these things on the fly, to be able to, do this mobile type of recording and put things. And then some of our folks just use that as an occasional thing, but it's an easy tool to have. So it's something that, but I think starting with why you're doing it, and knowing that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be 50,000 downloads to monetize, but you probably have to have some, you don't have to necessarily have a formal business plan, but you have to have some assets in place,
some goal,
plan, some thoughts
behind.
Yeah. And I think even if it's totally unrelated to business and marketing, your podcast, and it's really a fun thing, you should still think about it in some of the ways that we think about business and content creation in general. With that strategy in mind. Sure.
Cool. So you mentioned live streaming. Is that relatively new, or so? Let me fill me in on what's happening there, because I haven't really heard that much about it.
Yeah, generally it's growing a ton in the world in general, but specifically for podcasting, we launched our platform last year, sometime in autumn, and because we saw the growth of live streaming, we thought, well, this ties in so well with podcasting, and engagement and community are a thing that people struggle with and they want more of. So our platform is audio only. So it's a perfect fit for podcasters. And a lot of them have said, oh, that's the main reason I want to use it, because I don't want to jump to video, and some of them even make videos for their podcast, but they don't want to formally have to kind of really, set up for video and get the lights and that. So, and running a live stream video is different than just making a video.
Yeah, it's a fair bit involved.
Yeah, so it's audio live streaming, and what we've seen is, it's been a lot of fun for podcasters for engagement. What's really cool and what kind of warms my podcasting heart about it is that when we jump into some of these and join, we hear people saying, because listeners can call in and they'll say, oh, they're all over the world. And it seems to be that the live attracts even more of an international audience than general podcast listening. And I think that may just be because of what technology is popular in different places. And live streaming there's certain places internationally, I think, where that's really popular, and it's all mobile based. So I think people are just popping on their phone anywhere in the world. And as you said, people want to connect with other people. So it's been really cool. And then ours has monetization built in. So, and by the way, it's a free feature, and it's not just for people that are hosted with us. Mm-hmm. So any podcaster can use it. So they don't, it's not like a pitch for our hosting.
Yeah, it's cool,
hosting. So anyone can use it. And the monetization is that there are admissions, and you get to set how many free admissions, but above that, people pay a small, it's basically $1. And then you get a percentage of that. Mm-hmm. So if you get big audiences, or, if you want to let people do it free, then fine. But if you want to do it more as a money-making thing. And then people who are listening can give you virtual gifts. So they're like, hey, I want to buy him a cup of coffee. I want to send him a rose, whatever. And that's a certain value. And then you get the money directly to your PayPal account from it.
That's pretty cool.
So, and we see that as we give the podcasters or the live stream hosts an engagement score. Like, this was your engagement score for that live stream and also monthly. If you've done multiple, this is your engagement score, and we were kind of ranking, them. And that's part of the engagement is, the gifts you get, how many people attended, how long they listened, and also the comments and call-ins. So people can text and send emojis and stuff in the chat, and they can also call in. You can disable call-in if for some reason you don't want to take calls, but you can have a co-host or guest, remotely. So it's a nice way to do that. And then podcasters get a recording afterwards, so they can edit it and do whatever they want with it and post it to their hosting site. Or just some of our Podbean customers just post it directly. They don't do any editing of it. So whichever way they want to do, but it's a nice way. One thing that I don't think was really part of exactly how we did it, but I think a side thing that I've come across a lot is people that want to do the remote calls with guests have said, oh, this is another method of doing that. And then, we can make it live and invite people, or we can not take calls. And then, so I think it's cool. And I think it ties in with the whole overall monetization strategy, because if you're getting people doing that, coming and, calling into your show and stuff, they're going to be more likely to do whatever kind of support, besides just what's in the live streaming, but other support, in the future too.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I guess it brings like a little bit of the radio aspect to it as well, like podcasting being separate, but it kind of brings that live kind of aspect and turning it into, I guess, radio a little bit, but giving you a lot more control over what's involved in it as well. And the one thing I was just thinking then, is it possible, I guess it is, for people, they could offer like the live service as a part of their level of their membership or something like that, like say the Patreon, because they offer, if they pay a certain amount, they have access to the live and the call in compared to the free people don't, or something like that.
Yeah, they can do something. We're looking at some different ways to integrate that more, to do things. So right now it's like you set a certain number of free tickets, and I know we have the ability to do it where it's more like there's a special link or a special code. So that would be what we'd integrate probably for that. They could also just sort of publicize it to those people. I mean, there's some ways they could do it now, but I think we're going to get it where it'll be a little more sophisticated with that. But yeah, that's the kind of, those are some of the rewards that I've always told people for Patreon, or Podbean patron is, or any of those things that are either more of your content or more of you, more of your community, and any kind of live streaming. Some of the groups that I'm in, they've done Facebook Lives, and the group members get involved and that kind of thing. And that's something, those are the kind of things that people, if they're into what you're doing, that's kind of the stuff that they want. Yeah,
cool. So I guess just to finish it off, what's one thing that you're really excited for in the podcast space that's like moving forward, or that you've seen that's coming out that's not really that widely known, something along those lines?
I think right now the live streaming is a big one, just because we've launched it recently and we're seeing it, slowly develop and take off, and people learn the different ways they can use it. So that's definitely one. And then the other thing we do a lot of, which is kind of separate, but I guess it has some good parallels with the general podcasting industry, is we have a lot of internal podcasts where companies are doing podcasts for internally communicating or training employees. And what's cool about that is just the intersection of, you've probably seen a lot of companies doing branded podcasts, usually called branded podcasts. They're creating some content. There's some really cool ones out there too that aren't in any way very direct sales. Sometimes they don't even, it's kind of sponsored by the company. They don't even really, there's no push, at all. And so that's kind of the public side of it, and that's really cool. And then the internal side, it's surprising how similar it is. I guess what I would say from that is that I think it's really cool because it just shows how much more mainstream podcasting is becoming when big corporations, acknowledge it and start to move on it, because it's slower in corporations to, adopt sometimes these things. So it shows kind of where podcasting has come, and it also shows all the possibilities. And I think the underlying thing with that is storytelling or audio as a medium has such power. And I'm doing a presentation to a group of that do internal podcasting, and one of the some of the stats that they really care about more even than just your general podcaster is it's about a 500% increase in understanding and retention of information when you hear something audio versus like reading a newsletter.
Yep.
And so if someone's doing training in their corporations, like, well, okay, whether it's the sole thing we do or whether it's, another thing to reinforce it, we should really be doing it, because if we want people to learn this, we're not going to, and we know on the other side, the reading side, is that it's getting worse and worse because we're all kind of bombarded, and so we scan a lot, we just don't take it in as much anymore. And so those earbuds, it's like there's still something and that really makes a connection. And a cool stat or a cool study I'll share with you that I actually found when I was doing my community presentation, and it applies to this group, it applies to every podcaster. There was a study where they I can't remember who did it now, but I can find it and send it to you. They actually had people listening to audio, and they were running ads in it. And then they took a group and they had them, you have to multitask. Like, we want you to read this thing or do this other thing while you're listening. And the retention of the information, the understanding of that ad was higher when they multitasked.
Oh, really?
Which is so strange, because for any other thing that wouldn't be, because first of all, you can't multitask and do some things. You can't read and, try to drive or, so first of all, we know we can multitask in podcasting, but I always would have thought, well, that could be a downside, for ads or for trying to get someone to understand. Boy, if I'm encouraging these people to do training podcasts, I'm saying, hey, your salespeople can listen when they're, flying or, driving to their next client. That could have been a bad thing. They could have thought, well, then they're not going to be paying attention to what we're trying to get across to them. But this, this study is like, well, we need to rethink that power of that hearing, that message, that storytelling. And I was talking to a friend about it who actually is in HR, and she said, that totally makes sense to me, because when I think back to like when I was a kid listening to radio and the memories that it evokes, and she's like, I can remember so much of that content. And us podcast fans know that for sure. We really, how many times a day do you find yourself saying, I heard it in a podcast? Blah, blah, blah. So it's really, it sinks in a lot more, I think.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect note to kind of finish it on there. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, and talk soon.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.